Title: Homebuyer shocked after discovering house defects post-purchase. Faye was excited to purchase a designer house in Tasmania for $1.7 million, but her joy quickly turned to disappointment when she discovered major structural issues. In Tasmania, buyers often have to make a verbal offer on a property before they can inspect it for defects, which may release them from the contract. Faye discovered that a previous buyer had pulled out of the sale due to defects identified by an inspector. The agent failed to disclose these issues to Faye, and she was left with hundreds of thousands of dollars in repairs. Faye calls for accountability in real estate practices. Title: Finger flutings traced on a cave wall may be oldest known Neanderthal cave engravings. French cave art has long fascinated archaeologists and art historians, but a recent discovery is causing a stir in the scientific community. A series of shallow, parallel furrows, dubbed finger flutings, were found on the wall of a French cave and have been traced back to the Neanderthal era, making them the oldest known cave engravings created by Neanderthals. The discovery sheds new light on the artistic capabilities of our ancient cousins and raises questions about the evolution of human creativity. Marina logged 52 hours trying to get her phone fixed. The Ombudsman wants new rules. The Australian Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman (TO) has released a report citing too many telcos are not complying with the rules, causing distress for phone and internet users. The report highlights a range of problems and makes several recommendations for change, including stronger regulations and a registration scheme for telecommunications providers. The Communications Alliance, an industry group, is pushing back on the Ombudsman's recommendations, stating the current Telecommunications Consumer Protections (TCP) code is under review and working. However, some consumer and community groups are not convinced the industry can change fast enough to protect vulnerable consumers, citing poor credit assessment practices as a particular issue. Gas price controls failing, resulting in higher energy bills and interest rates. Gas price controls implemented by the federal government have failed to ease the cost pressures for manufacturers, resulting in higher inflation and pressure on interest rates. The $12 per gigajoule price cap on wholesale gas prices was supposed to deliver cost certainty for gas users but has been overwhelmed by the suppliers' strike. Many manufacturers have been unable to get contracts directly from producers or retailers. Instead, if contracts have been offered, the price has been well above the price cap, acting as a floor, not a cap. There is skepticism about the government's mandatory gas code of conduct making things any better. Title: The history of food throwing at public figures in Australia. Australian public figures have endured a long history of food throwing, as a way for people to make powerful statements. From egging Prime Minister Billy Hughes in 1917 to lobbing tomatoes at former Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser, food-throwing incidents aim to ridicule and reject political and moral positions. Evan Smith of Flinders University reveals that the act isn't about violence, but rather making a public figure look foolish. Despite security reviews at Parliament House, the tradition continues today, as seen with Egg Boy in 2019. Food throwing remains a controversial display of political expression in Australia. Title: Tips to prepare yourself for the end of financial year. Are you ready for the end of the financial year (EOFY)? It's just over a week away, and it's a perfect time to start preparing yourself for it. You don't want to leave it until the last minute and miss out on any benefits. One way is to get yourself return ready, and there is also help available if you're a vulnerable taxpayer and need free advice. Before lodging your tax return, make sure you have all the necessary documents, including receipts and bank or credit card statements. Be cautious about taking advice from family or friends and aim to understand exactly what you are entitled to claim. Don't rush the process and take the time to research what deductions you are entitled to. Title: Tasmanians brace for 10% increase in electricity prices. Tasmania's Aurora Energy has been granted permission to increase electricity prices for residential and small business customers by 9.51%, adding an extra $200 per year for median usage households. Annual electricity bills for businesses will rise between $126 and $284, depending on the tariff. Tasmania COS, the state's peak body for community services, has described the increase as a massive blow for the 1 in 4 Tasmanians living in poverty. Although Tasmania's increase is lower than that of other states, such as South Australia and Victoria, it is the second consecutive annual increase, following an 11.88% hike last year. Action for Alice founder hits pause, with mental, emotional toll unsustainable. Darren Clarke, the founder of the Action for Alice Facebook page, has announced he will be taking a break from the platform due to the toll it has taken on his mental health. The page, which has over 70,000 followers, gained national attention for its coverage of crime issues in Alice Springs. Clarke says operating the account was unsustainable and had taken a toll on his mental and emotional well-being. Despite the impact on tourism, Clarke has no regrets about shining the spotlight on Alice Springs, as he believes it was important to draw attention to the town's issues. Investigations continue into Katherine collision involving freight train and truck. Authorities are still investigating the cause of a collision between a freight train and truck at a level crossing in Katherine, Northern Territory last week. The crash resulted in the derailment of 2 locomotives, a crew car, and several trailing wagons, with 4 people taken to hospital. Emergency repairs have been completed, and the track has since reopened. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau, Northern Territory Police, and the Office of the National Rail Safety Regulator continue to investigate. The next steps include interviewing witnesses and collecting other evidence. The final report is expected later this year. Inquiry to probe undergrounding of thousands of kilometres of renewable energy power lines. A parliamentary committee in New South Wales will spend 9 weeks examining the feasibility of moving high-voltage transmission lines underground. The investigation will look into the cost and environmental impact of such a move, as well as whether it would affect project timeframes. The inquiry comes as the state seeks to connect its renewable energy zones (REZs) to the grid via a network of high-voltage transmission lines. The inquiry will also assess whether undergrounding the lines would be suitable for projects such as the HumeLink project in Riverina, as part of Snowy 2.0. Regional communities, including landowners, have expressed concerns over the impact above-ground power lines may have on their properties and the environment. Title: **** Health Forum hears 4-year-old Indigenous children are vaping as addiction rates rise. A health forum in Ballina, northern New South Wales, revealed that Indigenous children as young as 4 years old are vaping. Leanne Mills, an executive officer of the Bulina Aboriginal Health Service, raised concerns over extremely young children taking up the habit, likely due to exposure to smoking or vaping behaviour at home. Lismore paediatrician Chris Ingle reported that vaping addiction amongst children is on the rise, and those reports of 4-year-old users are very serious. The New South Wales government has announced a ban on non-prescription vaping products to eliminate devices that appeal to children. Title: Dire bullying claims prompt independent review of SA forensic facility. SA Health has ordered an independent review of the James Nash House forensic mental health facility following claims of an entrenched culture of bullying directed towards staff. A letter from concerned workers alleges a bullying culture and unprofessional behavior within one of SA Health's local health networks, which have driven away many experienced workers. The facility provides mental health care services for prisoners and accommodates patients who are deemed unfit to plead or not guilty due to mental incompetence. The Northern Adelaide Local Health Network, which the facility falls under, said the claims were being taken very seriously. Title: WA Premier stands firm as opposition to new Aboriginal cultural heritage law intensifies. The Western Australia (WA) government's plan to introduce new cultural heritage laws has faced opposition from several sectors. The Pastoralists and Graziers Association wants the legislation to be scrapped and rewritten, while farmers and mining groups have called for a 6-month delay in its rollout. These objections have been dismissed as scaremongering by the government, which is adamant that the new regulations will take effect on July 1, replacing the Aboriginal Heritage Act 1972. The Act has been introduced to modernise the state's cultural heritage laws and involves removing controversial practices such as the Section 18 process. Title: PwC slammed for calculated breach of trust in tax leak scandal. A parliamentary committee has released an interim report slamming consulting firm PwC for its calculated breach of trust in monetizing confidential federal government information. The report details how PwC used confidential Treasury briefings to help its clients avoid new laws targeting multinational tax avoidance. PwC's actions were discovered after a former partner at the firm shared the confidential information, leading to revelations of open discussion of Treasury policies in emails released by the Tax Practitioners Board. While the committee has not released a list of names of people involved in the leaks, it has called on PwC to disclose more information and cooperate with ongoing investigations. Title: Emotional toll of cleaning up after the Murray River flood. Cleaning up after a flood can have a significant emotional impact on people, as well as physical damage to their homes and properties. This has been the case for Kyle Smith, whose Murray River shack was flooded in South Australia. While he has received support from volunteers and the community, others have struggled to face the devastation. According to occupational psychologist Mel Taylor, dealing with the aftermath of a flood can be overwhelming, and some people find it too difficult to handle. Nevertheless, the help and emotional support from the community can be a source of comfort for those affected. Australia demands Twitter to tackle online hate. Australian authorities have issued a "Please explain" notice to Twitter demanding to know what it is doing to address online hate. The notice comes after a surge in harmful posts since Elon Musk's purchase of the social media platform last year. Twitter now has 28 days to comply with the demand, or face fines of almost $700,000 every day it misses the deadline. The E-Safety Commissioner expressed particular concern about anti-Semitic content and harmful posts directed at Indigenous Australians and members of the LGBTIQ+ community. Twitter has yet to publicly respond to the demand. NDIS minister vows to crack down on prices, offers participants greater flexibility. In a bid to reduce spending on the National Disability Insurance Scheme (NDIS) by $15.3 billion over the next 4 years, the Minister for the NDIS, Bill Shorten, has announced that people with disabilities will have more control over the length of their plans within the next year. The plan changes will help reduce the psychological burden of annual reviews while ensuring that participants aren't put in a situation where they may lose access to having their supports reviewed when their lives and families change. Additionally, Mr. Shorten has revealed that conversations with the consumer watchdog are taking place to make price gouging of participants illegal. Really questions her competence, New South Wales minister under fire over claims of cover-up over tasering of 95-year-old. New South Wales Police Minister Yasmin Catley is facing criticism over allegations of a cover-up regarding the tasering of 95-year-old Claire Nowland. The great-grandmother, who had dementia, died in Cooma Hospital last month, a week after being tasered by a police officer at her nursing home. The original media release from New South Wales Police omitted the word taser, raising questions at the time of the incident. It has now been reported that the word was included in the draft press release but was removed. Opposition leader Mark Speakman has called into question the police minister's competence. Title: Proposed development near entrance to Canberra could bring 5,000 new residents to city's inner north. The Yawani Country Club has submitted plans for the first part of its major redevelopment at its 8.6-hectare site near the entrance to Canberra, which could add 5,000 new residents to Lyneham. The development application includes 2 10-story apartment buildings and 10 townhouses adjacent to the golf course. The plan is a northward extension of the rapid residential development happening along Northbourne Avenue. While the golf course will remain part of the wider development, the club does intend to build a new clubhouse as its residential precinct expands. Concerns were raised about minimal community engagement and lack of green space provision. Title: ****, man remorseful after supplying drugs that led to girlfriend's overdose death. A Canberra court has heard of a man's remorse after his girlfriend died from an overdose of drugs he had supplied to her. Brooklyn Beattie, 22, pleaded guilty to supplying Valium and heroin to the 20-year-old woman who was a student at the Australian Catholic University in Canberra. The court heard the pair had also taken heroin in the 2 days before her death. Beattie obtained 6 Valium tablets and $80 worth of heroin to share with his girlfriend on Easter Monday, the day she died. The court heard that Beattie tried to administer naloxone, but it was too late. Beattie has been sentenced to a 6-month good behavior order and will have to keep up his rehabilitation. Man who defrauded farmers of $1.8 million and blew money on pokies, horses and alcohol jailed. Cameron Randall Gidley Baird has been sentenced to a maximum of 6.5 years in jail for defrauding 8 New South Wales farmers of $1.8 million. Gidley Baird had registered numerous businesses and opened several bank accounts as part of a scam, promising false business ventures that never materialized, instead pocketing the money. He blamed gambling on the poker machines and horses and an alcohol addiction for his fraudulent behavior. In sentencing him, the judge noted that Gidley Baird had attempted to pervert the course of justice by asking 2 victims to lie to police. Due to time already served, he will be eligible for parole in March 2025. Ford to cut 400 jobs, with Geelong workers hit hardest. Car manufacturer Ford is set to cut about 400 jobs in the coming months, with the majority of the losses affecting workers in product development and design roles. The cuts are part of a global efficiency drive that will see the company trim 22% of its workforce in Australia, which currently employs 1,800 people. The Australian Manufacturing Workers Union said most of the job losses would affect workers in the Geelong area and would not come into effect until September. The company has said that Australia will continue to be the centre of development for the Ranger and Everest globally. Source. Title: 3 climate activists arrested in Brisbane as protests cause peak-hour traffic havoc. 3 climate activists have been arrested after causing traffic chaos during a peak-hour motorway blockade in Brisbane. The Port of Brisbane motorway was heavily affected, with one protester chained between 2 vehicles cut free by police. The Blockade Australia group has been staging national climate actions for the past 3 days, with 5 arrests in Brisbane so far. The group's Bridget Slattery said the protest was against inaction on the climate crisis. The Queensland Trucking Association urged drivers to remain patient, but warned truck drivers' earnings could be affected if the blockades continue. Almost 50 women dead, most burnt to death in Honduras prison riot. A riot in a women's prison in Honduras has left 48 women dead and several injured, in violence the country's president has blamed on street gangs who wield power inside the prison. 26 of the victims were burnt to death and the remainder were shot or stabbed inside the prison in Tamara. The deaths were confirmed by the spokesman for the National Police Investigation Agency. Gangs wield broad control inside the country's prisons, where inmates often set their own rules and sell prohibited goods. The riot appears to be the worst tragedy at a female detention center in Central America since 2017. Title: Fighting surges in Sudan's capital as 3-day ceasefire expires. Sudan's capital witnessed heavy clashes between rival military groups as a 72-hour ceasefire expired. The clashes occurred in all 3 cities of the capital, Khartoum, Bari, and Omdurman. Both the Army and the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces (RSF) violated the ceasefire. The conflict has caused over 2.5 million people to flee their homes, with widespread violence in Darfur. The conflict erupted over disputes about a transition away from military rule after a coup in 2021. The United Nations is concerned about the conflict's impact on the world's newest nation, South Sudan. Link. Uganda's military rescues students abducted by Islamist fighters. The Ugandan military has rescued 3 of the 6 students who were kidnapped by Islamist fighters at the Lubirira Secondary School in Impondwe, Uganda. The group of fighters from the Allied Democratic Forces (ADF), linked to Islamic State, stormed the school, killing 42 people, mostly young students. The ADF is known for carrying out attacks in Uganda, including bombings at police stations and parliament buildings. 2 militants were killed and 2 guns were captured during the rescue operation. DNA tests are being carried out to identify most of the burnt bodies recovered from the boys' dormitory. Title: Ukraine President says counteroffensive progress is slower than desired. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that the country's counteroffensive progress against Russian forces is not going as fast as desired. In an interview with the BBC, Zelensky said that expectations of quick results were unrealistic and that the counteroffensive was not a Hollywood movie. He added that the push was not going easily as over 200,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory had been mined by Russian forces. Meanwhile, Russia's President Vladimir Putin noted a lull in Ukraine's offensive potential. The Ukrainian forces have reclaimed 8 villages so far, but have yet to reach the main defensive lines of the Russian forces. At least 29 people injured in Paris explosion. At least 29 people have been injured in a blast that ripped through a street in the busy Latin Quarter of central Paris. The blast caused the facade of a building to collapse and windows to blow out, starting a huge blaze. 4 people are in critical condition, and 2 are missing and feared buried under rubble. The Paris prosecutor's office said it was too early to say what caused the blast. Witnesses reported a strong smell of gas moments before the explosion. The area is usually packed with tourists and foreign students in the early summer.